Every story has an author. Every author has a story. Join us for off-the-page interviews, inside stories, and a look into the world of publishing. This is Page Turners. Welcome to Page Turners, presented by the agency at Brown Books. I'm Hilary Kennedy. Good manners can open up a world for getting along for both children and adults. Manners and Me, an easy-peasy guide for kids and the grown-ups who love them, is written by my guest, Nancy Dorrier. Nancy, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You have a background in starting a school back in the 70s. I want to hear about that. It was the Children's Schoolhouse, and then also I want to hear about the influence of Maria Montessori.
Okay. Well, the school that we started back in the 70s still exists, and it's for 2.5 to 5-year-olds. And at that time, children that age weren't going to school. And we had a little play group. My friends and I had a play group where we took care of each other's children while most of my friends were writing dissertations. And we lived in Davidson, North Carolina. It's a big college town. And we started studying Maria Montessori and Jean Piaget and about child development. And we didn't know anything. Maria Montessori had a whole theory of education where the children teach each other. So we decided to start a school, and we found the toys that Montessori schools have, where it's self-learning as opposed to the adults are teaching it. And now I've got a really good friend who's a Montessori principal. They teach, I didn't know this at the time when I was researching this, but they have classes in Montessori classrooms called Grace and Courtesy.
Wow, that's neat.
And they teach them how to take care of the environment. She said how not to walk on top of each other's work, how to put your toys away, how to dress, how to not interrupt when somebody's telling a story. So that's a big part of the Montessori classroom. So we started that school so we could have our children have access to that.
I love that, and I love that it's still around. That's so neat.
Yeah, it's really great.
Well, so why did you decide to write a book about manners?
Well, I realize when I'm around my grandchildren, there are things they don't know, and I'm not talking about please and thank you or don't talk with your mouth full of food, that kind of typical manners, but they don't know how to make a crook in their arm to escort me. If I had a hurt arm and I needed help, and my teenager grandchildren didn't know how to, make a crook in your arm to escort a lady.
Right.
Or when they go into a restaurant, we would be out and about and we'd go into a restaurant, and they always go in first, and they just didn't know how to hold a door, how to wait for an elevator and don't just stand there right next to the elevator and walk into the elevator. So I just realized there were things they didn't know. It wasn't that they had bad manners. So I disagree with anybody who says children these days don't have good manners. And it could be the adults don't. The children just don't know. Adults do know. That's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that too.
Right.
So
you mentioned your grandchildren. How did they kind of inspire some things with this book besides what you just told me?
Well, when I have something called Camp Nana that I produce every year, and now they're teenagers, but I've been doing it since they were little. And I realized I couldn't be with them all week doing all these activities if they didn't kind of help me. They didn't set the table, or they didn't know how to wash dishes, or they didn't and they didn't get in fights. If they had an argument about something, we would stop and talk about what happened. So I realized, so I started training them. It makes you more attractive if you have good manners, if you're kind to each other, if you help each other. It makes me want to do these activities with you if you're fun to be around, and if you're messing with each other all the time and not sharing your French fries. That's one of the ones in the book. No, you can't have any of my French fries. No, I'm just saying, good grief. So
it's true. It makes it a lot more fun when people are willing to share and get along.
Yeah. So that's how it started. Was I didn't want to be with them unless they had good manners. and whatever I called good manners. And sharing French fries is a good manners.
I totally agree. That definitely makes me like someone better if they're willing to share their French fries with me.
Absolutely.
Well, so you say that this book is also for grown-ups. It's not just a guide for kids. But what do you have for adults that are reading this book?
Well, and that's in the title, an easy-peasy guide for kids and the adults, the grown-ups who love them. So, and my hope is actually that the grown-ups, when they're reading this book, will have some ideas of their own for themselves. And since I've worked with organizations and organizational leaders, I definitely see it in the workplace.
Right.
And I think it's that, what I hope is that they'll start thinking twice, and that the respect and kindness just doesn't go that we're teaching children to have that, but we're teaching grown-ups to have that as well.
Right.
And particularly for children, if they have an idea, I have a series of stories that they're not published about called Bad Granny Stories. And there's stories about me when I didn't listen to an idea that one of my grandchildren had when they were little, and it wasn't going to work, you know. Kids have these wild ideas, and it's just, and I stopped it too soon. And so what I hope for grown-ups is and there are a couple of stories in the book about, like one is about clean your room right now, and come help me do this, clean up the yard right now. And it says in the book, if you can do it right now, because it's written in the voice to the child, if you can do it right now, but also tell the grown-up, give me a minute, I'm in the middle of this fantastic story, and I'm building this fort with the chairs and the pillows and the blankets. Give me a minute, I'm not quite finished with what I'm doing.
Right.
And that you don't have to jump just because the grown-up, and I'm hoping the grown-ups will read that and kind of realize that they can slow down and maybe build the fort too.
I love that. It kind of helps you kind of re-engage your own imagination.
Yeah, that's right. And they're little for such a short time, and their imaginations and their language. This is another thing from Montessori, the language development. I mean, she really, that's a precious time between ages really 3 to 7, where what's happening is a lot of language development and creativity. And you can miss it if you keep making rules and squash it down.
That's so true. As grown-ups, we need some of that back in our own lives.
That's right. One time we were riding a dinosaur train, so to speak, and my grandson had set up these little chairs for me and my daughter, and she had her baby, William, in her arms, and we were in this train, and he had all his dinosaur toys in the seats too, and it was called a Dinosaur Train, and she turned and looked at me and she said, when did we lose this? When did we lose this? Because we all had that. And then we become practical and...
Right, we lose a little bit of that magic.
That's right, that's right.
I love that. Well, so you have a pretty unique writing style. What are some of your most important creative influences and your inspirations?
Well, I study a lot with Natalie Goldberg, so a lot of people might know who she is. She wrote a book called Writing Down the Bones, and Zelda Lockhart, and as well. And their writing style is to write, not to be read or not to publish, but write to see what you have to say, and keep your hand moving. And if you're on the keys, keep your hand moving. But a lot of the writing I do is free writing, where I'm with pen and paper, and I can write, waiting at the doctor's office. So a lot of the style of writing is kind of a free association with no commitment to anybody ever reading it. And I also teach writing to corporate executives because I think it's really important. There are things you can see that you think, if you can write them, that you can't if you're talking, because you have to make sense to another human being, no matter how, like you're interested right now and you're listening to me. Right. But I still have to make sense to your brain.
Right.
As opposed if I'm just doing this free writing, I can find something out about myself or about the challenge I'm dealing with, or about one of my grandchildren died when he was 8, and he was very sick until he died. And that's where I really got into writing as a way to deal with loss or grief or no, I don't like this. And from that free writing free writing meaning just let it go, let it go. Don't edit it, don't criticize yourself, just write. And from doing that exercise, I was able to transform that experience from loss and tragedy to experiencing what a blessing he was, because we weren't trying to get him to do anything because he was disabled and he couldn't.
Right.
And so he was just this precious being that I discovered that through writing and being frustrated and being able to say anything. So that's the writing style, particularly with Natalie Goldberg, is say, write bad stuff. Don't try to write good stuff.
Right. How therapeutic.
Yeah, it's very therapeutic.
Oh, that's so neat. Now, so you mentioned leadership development. You had a career in leadership development.
I still do.
And training executives, helping kind of build great cultures with these companies. Let's talk a little bit about manners in the workplace some more. How could this book be used for adults in the workplace?
Well, I'm writing a kind of a companion piece to the children's book. And, the opportunity is endless for adults. If you just take the iPhones, you take the cell phones, and what people do in meetings, and they kind of sneak peeks at it, or you can see them having it underneath the table.
Yes.
Or you're out for a meal, you're at a social occasion, and you have your phone on the table. And it's just bad manners that you keep looking at it as opposed to being with the person you're with. Starting meetings on time and being prepared for the meetings. And we encourage our executives to end meetings before the time is up, but certainly never to let the meeting run over, because then everybody in that meeting is late to their next thing because you kept them over. And if you're the boss, they're not going to tell you that. So another one is keeping the kitchen, the corporate kitchen, the company kitchen, clean, washing the dishes and washing somebody else's dishes.
Replacing the water in the coffee maker, it's almost always on empty.
That's right. I had a situation where I had this one guy that nobody really liked. And he was always early to meetings and prepared, and he never liked anybody because they were late. So it's also bad manners to blame people for having bad manners too. So blame and gossip, and that we deal with that a lot in the corporation, that gossip is irresponsible, and it doesn't provide any leadership to gossip and not do anything about what you're gossiping about.
Right.
But this one guy, we coached him and worked with him to start noticing how people take their coffee. He was getting there early anyway. Get there early, and right before the meeting starts, fix all the coffees exactly the way everybody in the meeting likes it. And he started doing that, and he started just caring about the people in the meeting rather than he just flipped it from blame to caring about them. And his career took off. That seems so silly, but it's those little manners, making yourself, helping people out, building up the leader. That's another one. Most people resist the leader and gossip about the leader. So have the leader's back. It's not like you're a yes person. You definitely would challenge the leader if that needs to happen. But you're not doing it with bad manners.
That wins respect.
That's right. And people who are leading, they're serving your team and your company and dealing with a lot of things you don't even know they're dealing with.
Well, I love that you've written this book about manners that we don't even think about, just giving someone a compliment, like you said, opening the door, and just taking time for people and showing that you care how they like their coffee. That's
right.
For adults and kids. These are wonderful, valuable lessons.
Yeah.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being here. This is so neat. Well, be sure to look for Manners and Me, an easy-peasy guide for kids and the grown-ups who love them wherever books are sold. And we'll see you next time on Page Turners.